Alright guys, we decided to do a sit-down question and answer for this year for a different style of Burnin video. We've been putting out some tech tip videos earlier. We've got some of our top baits so far and our rod and reel setup, terminal tackle. So we'll link to them in the description if you guys want to go back and watch them. But today, it's all about your questions. So you, through YouTube and then Instagram and Facebook, you got us some questions that were on your mind as far as most of them relating to musky fishing and musky season. So we'll get into that now. Got the questions on the phone, and we'll start reading. So see what the top one here. Number one we've got on the list is what are your top 3 shallow river baits for depths running 3 to 8 feet? So I would say, kind of hit on it a little bit in the top baits video, but yeah, just to reiterate, I mean, you got probably your top one right there.
Yeah, that's probably my top one. You know, 6-7 inch small crankbait.
Yeah, twitching those minnow baits has been a big producer for us.
Twitching them, those long pauses in that thick wood up close to shore and structure seems to be the ticket for that.
Yeah, and a lot of those, I mean, with like fishing rivers, like, I mean, obviously pull pause type baits or like twitch baits like that are kind of top producers all around, but they really seem to shine on rivers, I think. And you got more opportunistic fish. I mean, obviously fish are obviously opportunistic, but there's just something about those river fish that they seem more aggressive. If they see something pause, they slam it. So yeah, that's the first one. Then I think we go to the 9-inch suic, huh?
Yeah, suic, same thing. You can stop that bait where you want to. Where they're set up is usually the key thing, because they're usually set up in a little certain spot where there's a little eddy or a little bit of current break by that wood. And when you can pull through it and pause right in front of their face, it's usually when they bite.
Yeah, it is. And you know, I mean, a suic is a great all-around producer, but I think where we've really learned to use it best is on a river. Mm-hmm. And it's not always the easiest to cast, but I think a lot that goes to be said with river fishing too is like more tactical casting. I mean, put those casts where you need it. Whereas if you're just working out over a weed bed, I mean, a lot of times you don't have to be precise, but if you see a spot where it looks like it could be holding the fish, tuck it in there and let those suics or, you know, that crankbait just hang, twitch it, and hopefully she slams it.
Yeah.
So number 3.
Number 3, top water. It's easy to work above, you know, wood or anything else as far as what's below, and fish are usually always looking up.
Yep.
And in that shallow water, it's not very far or hard either for a fish to come up a couple feet to hit this on top of the water.
Yeah, and we've had some very successful outings with top water. I mean, you especially. We had like years ago. I mean, over the years we've ran into just on fire. I mean, top water bites on a river, and it's fun. I mean, it's super fun. And when they smoke it, the explosion is, I mean, gets the blood pumping. That's for sure. So I think that kind of touches on top 3 baits.
Yeah.
I mean, for shallow running, and most of what we fish a lot is, I would say, that 3 to 8 foot depth.
Yeah.
I mean, we're fishing a little bit deeper at times, obviously, but you know, when we're fishing shoreline or current, or you know, current breaks along shoreline, that's what we're picking. All right, question number 2. None of these are in any specific order, but we just got a bunch of them we're going to try to roll through and try to hit on them all as much as we can. So number 2 is tips for someone who wants to fish the spring bite on the Fox River in Green Bay for the first time. Things to look for as far as depth and structure. Also, any advice as far as crowds, boat launch, parking situation, etc. So
the one thing though is putting your time in.
Putting the time in is huge, and if that is one thing that you know, and this can go for all of musky fishing, but that really taught us to put in our time.
Yeah.
And you're gonna hit huge crowds, but it's just part of it. I mean,
that's how it is.
And you have to kind of power through it. I mean, as far as, you know, like we've talked about before, you're almost, you know, that opening weekend, if that's when you're going to fish it, you really almost have to get in line and just you know, start fishing, but put some time on the water is probably our biggest tip with Green Bay, or that early season in the Green Bay area. And there's other areas to fish there that, I mean, there's a ton of water, really, if you look at it. And the key to remember is those fish are shallow, just coming off of spawning usually. And as far as structure, I mean, pretty basic. We're casting shorelines and working over flats, you know, probably in that 3 to 5 foot range, I would say.
Sometimes a little bit off the edge.
Yep. Yep, and that is one thing too we've learned to adapt, because every year going into it, fish are in different locations.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have a general idea going into it,
Yeah.
but depending on how that spring warms, or how, you know, that spring is played out as far as temperatures and water temps, fish might be in a different zone.
Yeah.
Like as far as they might be well past spawning.
Yeah.
Say if, you know, you had an early spring before that opener, and like Jake did say, there is a part to that. So like a lot of times, like I said, it's shallower flats. That's kind of what we go in with thinking, depending on water temps. But we have also explored, you know, as far as working more off the edge of, like, towards the river channel a little bit, off those flats.
There's always fish coming up.
That's
There's
the
always
thing, too.
fish leaving. It's constant. I mean, there's a lot of fish in the Green Bay system.
Yep.
And it's a big river.
Yep.
So.
And Green Bay fish are notorious for moving. I mean, they're always
Yes.
moving in, moving out. And, you know, if you make a pass or somebody makes a pass in front of you, don't think that's a loss.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of fish to go around.
Yeah.
So, as far as, you know, boat launch situation, I mean, it's a lot of it is just getting in there, getting dirty, and getting fishing. You know, I mean, you're gonna hit crowds,
Yeah,
but
you just got to put up with it, get in line, respect the other people.
exactly, yeah, that is very true, and we try our best to. I mean, obviously, you know, give the right of way to people, and you do what you can, and you hope it's your year for the big one,
Yeah.
because there's plenty of them out there. So hopefully that answers some of your questions as far as that related to, and maybe we'll see you out there if we get there this year. So, any tips on creating a successful YouTube channel? Question number 3. So, I would say going into this, like Burnin 8's how we created it was, you know, Jake, Alex, and I mean, we all love video. We love creating a story, and we have a passion for musky fishing and hunting. And they really opened my eyes to hunting. We've all just kind of dug in and went to musky fishing. But what I've always wanted to do, and I think what Jake and Alex, we like to produce quality entertainment. And we might not always have the quantity, like we're not throwing up a ton of videos, and because we don't have the time because we're working full time, but we really try to, like, put out a quality video for you guys. And that's one way for us to differentiate what that we wanted to was produce quality entertainment. But, you know, like, one of the biggest tips I would say for creating a successful YouTube channel is staying consistent with your uploads. And the first couple of years that we did it, we really tried to kick out as much as we could, tried once per week, which we didn't sleep much. We still don't sleep much, but, you know, it really takes some hard work. And I guess the biggest tip as far as that's concerned is don't be afraid to put the hard work in, because it's what it's going to take, and that's with, like, any business. I mean, you got to put the time in, you got to put the work in, and produce some type of, you know, whatever business it might be, produce that, you know, as far as this is concerned, produce that video that keeps people coming back.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I guess, a little bit of a, you know, in a short answer, a few tips on how to produce or start a successful YouTube channel. I mean, you're gonna have to power through a lot of different things as far as, I mean, we ran through the viral video with Bullet Hits Boat, which really opened our eyes to what social media was like. I mean, as far as, like, comments that you gotta just, some of them you just gotta ignore, and you gotta push on and be like, you know, there's always gonna be haters, there's gonna be big fans,
Yeah.
but, you know, you just take the feedback and you just kind of roll with it.
Yeah. You do yourself. You do what you want to do, and you can't let someone else differentiate what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's perfect advice, and that is kind of one thing that we always wanted to do, was just show you guys reality. What is it like when we go fish on a certain weekend? I mean, obviously you're not seeing all, you know, 30 some hours that we're fishing, but you get the gist that, you know, this is what's happening. We failed today, we come back tomorrow and we put a 48 in the boat. I mean, that's, you know, that's musky fishing. Or, you know, Alex is sitting in the cold weather, the snow's falling on top of him, it's getting late, he's thinking it's done, and all of a sudden 9-pointer shows up, he drops the buck. I mean, that's, you know, the reality of hunting and fishing is kind of what we wanted to showcase. So turn into a little bit more of a little background of Burnin 8's too, but hopefully you guys can pull some advice and answers out of that one. All right, question number 4. Favorite Minnesota musky lake? That's an interesting one, because I always come back to Vermilion. I mean, we haven't fished a ton in Minnesota.
Yeah, we haven't gone to Minnesota very much.
So, like, for us to say all-time favorite would be XYZ Lake, that's tough to say because we have so much to explore there. If we only had more time and we could travel more, you know, if our jobs allowed it and stuff. But I'm going to say, as from what I've fished, Vermilion really sticks out in my mind just because it's a very cool place. and the caliber of fish that you have have a chance to catch there is pretty amazing. I mean, it's a tough fish. It's grueling at times, but very, very cool place to fish and very scenic.
Yeah.
So, and it's a different style of fishing than we normally fish.
Yeah.
So we're used to fishing a lot of weed lines in the rivers, weed lines in lakes, and then the river style fishing. Then we go to Vermilion, we're fishing more of that rock bite islands. And so I don't know what yours would be. I mean, but that's mine.
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, that's the most time we spent, so it's pretty easy to say.
That is true. Yeah, we spent more time there. It really, I don't know. It just left an impression on my mind, and would definitely like to try to get back there again.
Yeah.
Maybe this summer, we'll see. So, question number 5: when fishing May to June and September to November, what are your guys' go-to baits, and does it pay to burn blades in those time frames? Go-to baits from May to June. So I'd say that's early season. So we're going to start with likely smaller bucktails.
Small bucktails.
It's single-bladed bucktails are kind of our good starting point as far as early season.
Yeah.
And then I think we will in May to June start implementing double eights, but single eights are another nice early season bait to start out with. I think twitch baits.
Yeah, twitch baits work.
Glide baits, another thing.
Yeah, pole paws. I mean, it's all kind of the same. Smaller.
Yep.
Smaller in that early time, but
we probably wouldn't be running too much top water. I mean, as it gets into the latter part of June, mid to late June. I mean, this is all relative to northern Wisconsin too.
Yeah.
We should know that. I mean, obviously you guys down south are going to be probably warming up faster, but we tend to stick smaller in that May to June area.
Yeah.
So small bucktails, small twitch baits, smaller glide baits, and maybe implementing some top water as we go into that latter part of June. Now, September, November, I mean, we basically skipped the heat of, I would say, musky season there.
Yeah.
But September, November, I would say September is top water and suics. 9-inch suics, I mean, that's a big time producer in September.
Blades,
especially.
starting to get into those bigger blades.
Yep.
Double eights, 9s, 10s, still good.
Yep. Yeah, I would say that the top water bite kind of it'll trail off. And since we're going into November here with this question, it's going to kind of trail off. I would say once you hit probably October. I mean, it depends really on the fall. If it stays warm, I mean, your 51.5 was late September.
Yeah.
On top water, so it's
relative.
It is. You keep in mind the water temps. I mean, if it's cooling off faster, I would say top water is going to start to die out. But if you really want to get into later season, then as far as October, November, I would say our go-to bait is going to be a sucker.
Yeah.
I mean, we've caught a lot of fish in that, and we don't put a lot of time in with a sucker because for us it's probably mid to end of September when we start implementing it.
Yeah.
But then October, November, I mean, that's crucial for us to be at least dragging a sucker while we're casting.
Yeah.
So I would say that's kind of our go-to baits in a summary for that question. And then, does it pay to burn blades during those time frames? I would say with burning blades, I've always kind of related that to warmer water temps.
For a fish to catch up to any bait, it's nothing for them.
Yeah.
So burning is definitely not out of the question.
Right.
And it's a lot of people say too, it's something with pressure. Pressured fish, burning stuff. It's more of a reaction to hit it.
Yep.
Than just them following behind it.
Yeah, I would say you could implement it in at times when you got warmer water and if you need a different presentation. I mean, once fall rolls around though, I would say October. Late September, October, November, we tend to slow things down.
Slow things way down.
And that includes blades. So, I mean, you can still run them, but slow it down a little. I mean, no matter what, one tail kick and they can be on your bait.
Yeah.
But just some ideas and some thoughts to throw out there as far as relating to that question. All right, number 6. This deals with new water, which we get this question a lot, which totally understand because we love fishing new water. I mean, it's one of our favorite things to do. So this question, there's 2 questions mixed in one here because we kind of we'll lump them together and try to answer it all in one. But please talk about your strategy for catching fish on new waters when you only have a day or a weekend to figure it out. And this is another question revolving around that. How do you attack a new lake? What are your research approach and tools you use? Where where do you choose to start once there, and why? What lures and why relocate to a particular area? So to start this off, as far as like how do we break it down for a weekend when we only got a weekend to figure it out, I would say your research ahead of time is big. So lay the groundwork, lay the foundation. Now this means you're going to be looking at, like, this is probably one of our top resources for finding information.
Yeah.
It's a Sportsman's Connection book for the Wisconsin musky fishing. It basically breaks down different lakes throughout the whole state.
Yeah.
And there is some that are, I mean, you have ones that are actually books that are actually for particular parts of the state that go even more in depth. And those will, I mean, this one's specifically related to muskie.
Yeah.
But the one thing that you should keep in mind is those ones that break down by area, they deal with bait. Like basically, it'll tell you more about walleyes, crappies, perch, what those populations are in those lakes, and you can even kind of decipher information based on and say, well, this is like the forage, this is the bait fish that are in there, so you can learn even from those other types of, the other books that have more specific area related. This is statewide for the state of Wisconsin. I'm sure there's other states out there that you guys can look into, but that is one of our top tools as far as laying the groundwork, saying, okay, number one, is there muskies in this lake? Number two, what's the population? Because we're going to be looking at also surveys and DNR data just to say, okay, here's what stocking was. You can figure out the growth of fish or how, if those fish are even still relevant. Because obviously some of these studies are old, but DNR data, online data, that's kind of where we lay our groundwork in the off season. Just try to get ideas, build mental notes, and say, we read about this lake. Let's go there and start exploring. Now, so I would say a lot of your new water, start researching ahead of time.
See what's in the lake. Is there weeds? Is it rocks? And just kind of get a general idea of where you want to fish. So when you get there, you don't waste time driving around. Even though it's not a bad thing to do, is drive around, look at your electronics, find the weed edges, how deep they go to.
You've got spots picked out to go to research, and that's what we do. So these books, or even, other information online is going to tell you that XYZ lake has, great weed lines, or it has great rock structure, great timber. Now, you can kind of pinpoint based on, things that you've read where they are, get there, scope it out with your electronics, and then go to work. So, once we get there, then that's where I would say side imaging really plays a role into finding these spots faster. Now, if you guys can get mega imaging on your Humminbird, that is kind of a game changer as far as breaking the curve, the learning curve that's associated with getting to a new lake. You're still gonna have to put in time, and you're still gonna have learning experiences out there. But if you're, dropping waypoints, scoping spots out, because say you got a moon time coming up in a couple hours or 3 hours, you're out there for an hour scoping around. That's key. That's what we've really tried to do when we're out there on new water. But where do we choose to start and why? It's going to be related to structure. Where we think the best weed bed is, or best rock structure. One lake that we fished this summer, it was clearly a rock-based lake. Now, once your side imaging started showing it, we're like, okay, now we can see what these fish are relating to. It's boulders, it's rock fingers coming off. So it's like, we're going to pick actually Jake did it. We found the best rock hump there, and we were like, man, this looks really good. So fish it during the moon time, boom.
And that's the thing with that mega imaging, is you can find spots that you can't see in these books or see on other maps online. You find these spots that nobody technically knows about. I'm sure some people do.
Right.
And
they're not necessarily community spots, but it's like maybe just off of that community spot, your side imaging picks up, and you don't have to run over it with side imaging, but your side imaging picks it up, and it's like, boom, that's gold right there, and you try it, and it pays off. So, that's kind of, we're going to pick the best structure as far as like once we get there and start picking it apart, basically. What lures and why? I think we're going to go with, at first.
You want to cover water, so a bucktail's always good.
And a lot of times, like, we run opposing things, because Jay can cover water with, like, say, a bucktail if he's up front, and then I come behind and I'm running a twitch bait, and then maybe if Alex happens to be along that weekend, he's throwing a topwater. But I know that sounds like it's a vague answer, but Jake's covering water to see if he can pull active fish. Mine is more of a reaction type bite where it's like, what type of mood are these fish in? Where you might pull some out, but I would say, yeah, a lot of the key is to cover water too,
Yeah.
but not too fast because we also work areas very thoroughly.
Yes, thoroughly, but you need to be able to cover different areas of the lake.
Yeah, and when we say covering water, it doesn't necessarily mean like zipping through this spot or this weed edge. It's covering it by casts and
Yes.
casts and casts because you know it's a good weed edge, and that's the first thing that you have to let your electronics or your eyes with polarized sunglasses tell you. Say this is a good weed bed, weed edge. I can see it. Let's fish it. It's gonna hold fish.
Yeah.
So, I think that basically hits everything. I think.
Being confident that you're fishing a good spot, because a lot of times it just could be the day. You could be fishing the best spot in the lake where you could catch 5 fish one day. Next day you won't even see a fish.
Yeah, that
So
is.
you can't beat yourself up if you don't catch anything or see anything. It just might be the day.
Right. I mean, we've had numerous lakes that we've tried unsuccessful, and it's like, did we go back there?
Yeah.
Well, we know. I mean, there's so many variables as far as that's concerned. So, yeah. On to the next. I never see you guys trolling. Why is that? Interesting question, because I mean, we really don't have any experience trolling. I mean, we have trolled before, but it's not like our style of fishing. I mean, I've grown up casting. You've grown up casting. I think we really love picking apart lakes by cast.
Yeah.
And
Just don't have the opportunity to do it as well with my boat.
yeah, it's not set up for
Yeah.
it. Which, I mean, maybe sometime in the future, we could do some trolling. If we got the setup for it. But I think I don't know. Another part for me too is I've always loved to feel that hit
Yeah.
or have the opportunity to figure 8 fish.
Yeah.
And that's nothing against trolling because both are effective.
Yeah.
But when you're covering water, some days that's what you need to do. It's
Yeah.
just troll because that's the day. But yeah, I mean it's just something that we've never implemented just because we grew up casting.
Yeah.
So number 8, what is your longest stretch of time spent fishing that you've gone without catching a fish? Yeah, I know the battle of that because I can specifically, it's probably documented on camera actually, because there was one year where, actually I'm pretty sure we were on Green Bay, and it was really hitting home how long it had been since I put a fish, and we've been fishing every weekend, like pounding it hard. I mean 12, 14 hour, 15 hour days, and it's like, then I started losing fish. It's like, okay, well I went from like blank to nothing, which you're usually still putting fish in the boat because thank God, I mean, the guy's effective at fishing. He's just good at what he does. Let's leave it at that. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, I can't put a fish in the boat. I mean, this was just, it starts to become mental for you is like a big thing. And then all of a sudden, I started losing. I had a string of like 5 losses in a row. And some of those were very good fish, and I was ready to pull my hair out. I went a month and a half without catching a fish. And that was like I said, we were fishing every weekend. Both days, both days, long days. And then finally I got a boat side hit that was, we'll play it back here, but it was one of probably the best boat side hits I've ever experienced in my life on Green Bay. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, now I remember why I do this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as far as your longest stretch, I mean,
I don't.
You
not
had-
really sure, but
you had one this was it this summer, or was that last year? Where it was like, for you it was like 3 weeks, and that was like an eternity, or like 2 weeks, and it was an
usually
eternity.
it goes with a lot of lost fish.
Yeah, and I mean it's, I don't know, I know for a fact that I went a month and a half because it really bothered me, but I don't think you've ever gone quite that long.
I'd say maybe a month
Maybe.
in the
Yeah.
last since we started fishing.
Yeah.
But like I said, it usually goes with a lot of lost fish.
And a lot of times you guys don't see that stuff because it
Yeah.
doesn't make a video. I mean, obviously lost fish are part of musky fishing, but we can only show so many of those a year. I mean, we do like to show the reality, but there's been some rough days that haven't made the cut.
Some big lost fish too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that answers that question. Next question: how are you guys working deep structure, deep rocks, deep weed lines? So I would say a lot of the lakes we fish are, we do work deeper weed lines. They're not necessarily deep weed lines. I mean, we've worked some in Minnesota that were like 20 plus feet, and that's very different from those are up north, but I wouldn't say we fish a lot of them. But I mean, as far as like fishing deeper structure, what comes to mind is, I would say obviously you want to get down into that strike zone more so. You know, it depends the time of year. I mean, if it's weed line bite right now, which is majority of summer, I would say, you know, for musky fishing, and actually the majority of the year is weed lines. But if you want to get down onto that weed line, it's going to be, you know, deeper rubber.
Yeah.
You know, or bigger rubber, I should say, on working it deeper, slower. You know, they make the new weights that go on to the Medusas, the Poseidons. So it allows you to get deeper along that weed line. Another would be, which we talked about in our last video, weighting bucktails.
Yeah.
And maybe slowing it down just a touch to get deeper in the water column. But I would say, you know, slowing the boat down too is going to allow you to work it more effectively.
Yeah.
It's going to be, I mean, obviously you know, it's wind dependent. If you got big wind, you're not going to be able to work structure as thoroughly, but you usually do find ways to slow down the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, with the trolling motor or whatever, you know, running it the right way versus the wrong way. And there is actually a question talking about boat control that we can touch on that a little bit later. So, I mean, as far as if I'm going to be working deep structure, that's kind of going to be what I'm going to be doing. But also keep in mind, like we said earlier, muskies are they're up. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you know, for people to say you can't, you got to, like, if you're fishing suspended, you can still run top water.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's...
Deep weed edges, they still...
Yeah.
They might just be sitting 5 feet below, and you might be in 25 feet of water.
Right.
And it all depends on where they're sitting, how active they are. So you can't rule anything out.
Right.
It's a muskie.
Yeah. But I would say tools of choice, you know, those are a couple ideas
Yes.
as far as working deeper structure. But if they want it, they'll come get it.
Yeah.
All right. On to the next one. If you could only fish muskies 1 month of the year, which would you choose and why? That's an interesting one. Because I think each month almost has its different, you know, its pluses and minuses. For some reason, I really like September. If I could pick 1 month, because it seems like a lot, or like if you could break the months into halves, like the end of August where it starts to cool down, and then the beginning of September.
Yeah.
Like if that's where I had to break a month, if I could do it like that, I would. That's my personal opinion. I do kind of like early season too.
Early season, yeah.
I mean, we've contacted some big fish early season.
Yeah, that's the thing is they go into spots that make them more vulnerable, especially out in Green Bay.
More accessible.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. I do like early season, but something, I don't know, there's something about after you got that heat up of summer, and then you get that cool down that we've done very well with lakes and rivers.
Yes.
And that kind of stands out in my mind is if I could pick 1 month. It would be probably broken up, like I said, end of August, beginning of September. But it all depends on how the year's playing out, but somewhere in that time frame. So, well, just looking through the remainder of the questions here, we still have quite a few to go, but thank you guys for sending in all the questions. We appreciate it. It gives us something to think about and talk to you guys about. So hopefully you've enjoyed this first session of Q&A, and we'll be back with part 2. So we'll see you guys next week.